Welcome to the Idealand podcast, hosted by Ravi Kamati Reddy. Eric and Stephanie have combined veterinary and human medicine to bring science for marine mammals to help us live longer and better lives. Find out what they've learned from dolphins to improve our health, and get to know Fatty 15.
So take me back to where this all started, because it's like the guy who, I forgot his name, was like the COO or the CEO of AOL, and then was like, oh yeah, it's like almost like an overnight success. It's like, yeah, it was a 10-year overnight success. Yeah, it was great. These things usually go back a long time, right before it hits the press release. So take me back when a press release wasn't even a part of the equation.
Sure. I guess I was born, just joking, Robbie. I guess we go back.
You can go there.
To when I'm a veterinary epidemiologist. Was working for the CDC, the World Health Organization, helping to track, diseases, set up disease surveillance systems all over the world. And then about 20 years ago, I was asked by the U.S. Navy to help start and lead a clinical research program to continually improve the health and welfare of the Navy's dolphins, which, was fascinating. I thought this would be an amazing, year or two off before heading back to Atlanta at the CDC. And it ended up being a 20-year journey leading to today. And so, the discoveries were initially, made where the Navy takes incredibly good care of their dolphins. That's a whole, another story, but population of 100 dolphins getting amazing care for over the past 60 years. Dolphins now at the Navy live 50% longer than dolphins in the wild. And as the Navy started basically growing a population of geriatric dolphins. And long story short, that while taking care of this population, we started to see that as dolphins were getting older, some, but not all, were developing conditions similar to people who get older. Chronic inflammation, high cholesterol, even the full suite of changes in the brain consistent with Alzheimer's. And so that led to us reaching out to experts in the community on Alzheimer's, on aging, on cholesterol and inflammation. And that then led to just, again, this tremendous adventure where not only have we been able to do work to help dolphins and improve dolphin health, but now to improve individual and global health through the discoveries we've been making through this work. And I'll stop there and allow Eric to say.
It is actually a really amazing population to study, right? Because they don't have the vices that we have. Right? They're not drinking coffee or,
I was going to ask you if they do. Like, do they? We just don't know. Like, they got their little dolphin bars, and they're like, there's like ones they're selling drugs. It's like, dude, I got this seaweed. It's really good. It's
pretty
like
sure,
I don't.
They're with the military, so it's pretty strict quarters over there.
And so this population, they see their doctor every day. They get routine labs, not when they're sick, but just routine labs. And the Navy had the foresight to create electronic medical records before pretty much they existed in the human world. And so this is what happens when you treat a population of animals with the best health care. They live 50% longer than those in the wild, and it provides an amazing resource to study the pathophysiology of chronic diseases. Like as Stephanie mentioned, why, if you control for everything, do some dolphins get metabolic syndrome and precursors to the diseases Steph mentioned, and some don't? It just changes the understanding of disease processes, on its head. And
Yeah. So can I step back for a second here? And there's a lot of questions about why the Navy has dolphins and those things. But can you help me solve a paradox, which is, it seems like dolphins are big enough to where you really can't make them do anything unless they want to do it. And secondly, they're also not smart enough to sign contracts. So exactly how are the Navy and the Dolphins, how did this partnership start, and what is that partnership like? So put me in the mind of one of the Navy's dolphins. What am I doing all day? How is it different other than this fabulous healthcare system, which you've described, which is, I think Sweden's taking notes right now. It sounds pretty fantastic. But take me through like a day in the life of a Navy dolphin versus one that I would find in the wild.
Sure, happy to answer the question, and I will give the caveat that I am not representing the Navy, the Navy Marine Mammal Program. We're working closely with them, but wanted provided that caveat. So, a day in the life of a Navy dolphin is a good day. They live and work in the open ocean every day. They go out. They use their skills that they're really good at doing, like finding underwater objects and enemy swimmers, and it's a piece of cake for them. To be honest, dolphins are a very social, intelligent creatures like us, and they have a home kind of setting like us, and they have their family like us. And so for the Navy dolphins, San Diego Bay is their home. Those 100 dolphins, approximately 100 dolphin population is their family. To be honest, I think they tolerate a trusted relationship with the humans, but they have access to food, healthcare, and heck, I wouldn't, if you see a lot of these wildlife shows, how difficult and how much harder the environment is for wild animals these days. They're smart enough to know there's a good thing going in their home in San Diego Bay.
Yeah, so that I think they've seen that, right? They're like, wow, David Attenborough says it's really hard out there. I think we're going to stay close to the Navy. So that makes sense. And I get this underlying concept of biomimicry. It seems like these populations are similar. We can learn from them. But there are some obvious questions there. And one is, how do you know? It just seems like, hey, aren't dolphins and primates so different on the evolutionary tree, so far apart? How do you know that what they go through is stressful in the same way that we do? Because haven't they evolved to thrive in that marine environment for millions of years? So is it okay to generalize what you learn from them, just from a general species, across species thing? We do this all the time in the lab anyway with other mammals. But how, when you entered this, both of you entered this research regime with marine cetaceans, how developed was that idea? How open were people to you saying, hey, look, I know we use mice. Let's look at this population. Or did you get a lot of resistance, or was there a lot of support or already momentum in the field?
I think there was, we know, there was immediate interest in the potential for a dolphin to be a parallel to a human. It was in no way expected. I mean, even from us. So, we spent probably 10 years, Ravi, working with experts in the areas in which there were parallels, whether it's metabolic diseases or neurodegenerative diseases, and liver diseases. And then we published in the peer-reviewed literature. So we ended up, there's now over 70 papers that we published that was testing and looking at the parallels between humans and dolphins as we started digging. And it started up at the body level, systemic level, of seeing, okay, they get similar changes in liver enzyme levels or in glucose or in cholesterol that mimics metabolic syndrome in people. Then we went down to the tissue level to look at, for example, the liver, and lo and behold, dolphins get fatty liver disease that looks just like those in humans. And as it was really by working with these experts that we started with the null hypothesis that these parallels were probably superficial and wouldn't translate. But as we dug deeper and deeper and continued to publish in the peer-reviewed literature, it became more and more real, to the point where as we started making these discoveries, we were able to show things like, as well as others like Illumina, were able to show really fascinating parallels between humans and dolphins. Like, dolphins and humans have the largest brain to body ratio of any other species, even compared to primates. So if we talk about glucose metabolism needs to help meet the needs in the brain, check. Humans and bottlenose dolphins specifically have parallels. Fatty liver disease, like we said, ends up being exactly the same pathology in the liver. The human chromosome 1, our largest chromosome, which is human, could call it human chromosome 1, ends up having almost exact same synteny, which means not just the same genes, but the same order of genes, with only a handful of species, which are bottlenose dolphins, great apes, and the two-toed sloth. So Evolution, absolutely, you're right, Robbie, that dolphins and humans are not close evolutionarily, but it looks like they have followed parallel paths with regard to if I have a large brain and I'm a large mammal who lives a long time, they've co-evolved similar adaptations, which has led to its ability to translate.
Yeah, Robin, it's a good question because why, what's the difference between mice, worms, and flies, and studying long-lived populations? And so a lot of that, as Steph mentioned, is that the physiologic processes, are just different. Longer-lived animals need different processes to live longer, and so studying longer-lived animals has benefits.
Yeah, and we'll just pause at that because then we move on to actually say, okay, let's take it to the lab and really put it to the test.
What did it feel like when this pun actually is intended, it was a fishing expedition in the beginning, right? And you're looking for these correlates or you're trying to do the regression analysis to see what is it about the members of this population that are making them live longer or be healthier. What was it like? What did you find when you initially did that? And what did it feel like when you actually found signal in the noise?
Initially, I should start by saying we are incredibly gifted, right, with access to this population. It all started and continues to have a focus on improving baby dolphin health, right? And I think that has had a big role in what has made it so translatable. So it's not we're working on a research model and seeing if it can translate. We're actually trying to see the benefit, in this population first and then translate it to humans. So as we saw these similarities in cholesterol and inflammation and liver enzymes, we, we were able to do so because these dolphins, like Eric shared, we have longitudinal samples, so 25 to 30 to 50 years of data every month from every dolphin in that population, so over their lifetimes. So that allowed us to detect trends. And so the paper that we published with Nick Shork, a leader in longevity last year in PNAS, this enabled us to dive in. I'll use my own puns as well. So to dive in and be able to basically look at this trends analysis in a very clean population over 25, 30 years to not only show that some dolphins were aging faster than others, which is always what we believed in people. But we're always saying, oh, it's the environment's different. It's that if you put everybody in the same population and they had the same diet for their whole life and the same health care, the question, would we all age the same? So through this paper, and that was a huge aha moment, where despite the fact that these dolphins were living in the same population, same diet, same healthcare, we identified slow versus accelerated aging dolphins. Aha, right? And so now we're able to go in and figure out why, target slow aging dolphins to then target slow aging dolphins so that we could turn an accelerated aging dolphin into slow aging dolphin. The implications for that are huge, right? If we can slow down the aging rate, we can stem chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes and heart disease and Alzheimer's. So that was a huge aha moment for us. And now to have these molecules translating in the human side is really exciting.
Yeah, and the ability to predict aging and your rate of aging is something that you could potentially only do in a population that's this clean, right? And so, in what we found, and it's in the paper Steph mentioned, is that using normal labs that you would get in a 5-year physical can be predictive of whether you're a slow or fast ager, which is pretty amazing. And so that was a moment. It just one more is, we use omics, multi-omics, metabolomics, lipidomics, genomics, all that on these samples. And so, we had a diet study looking at the metabolome. And, when we sent the metabolome out, it came back, and the people are like, how did you get such clean data? Because the top 30 molecules were 100% predictive of which group got which diet, which they had never seen before. So they were blown away, and this is a major metabolomics company. So it's just an example of, the cleanliness of the data.
Eric is a physician, as a medical doctor who's used to seeing humans. Was it, weird to see like the same labs that we order on people or track these things on a population that, of marine mammals. What was that like, just coming into this from the background training of human medicine?
Right, you get used to it, but it is weird. I trained at Naval Medical Center San Diego, and seeing a dolphin coming down the hallway to the CT scanner is not, normal in most hospitals. But, they have dolphins, they have different animals coming through that they care for, and you get used to it. And, you look at labs and x-rays and things like that, and, they're the same principles that you're treating them with. It's just sometimes a little of a shock. That is not a human foot, or something. That's a flipper, or something of that nature. So, from that standpoint, it's very different. It's exciting. But from the healthcare standpoint, the parallels are pretty amazing. Even if you look at some of the labs we're talking about, CBCs, chemistries, lipid panel, all that, they're remarkably similar.
Dolphins are pretty active every day. I'm just concentrating on this because I really want to understand the animal model here and sort of put the rest of it in context. What are the important differences between how humans are living, I would say, in the Western world, like let's just say the United States for now, because obviously there's variation. So what's different that we should be aware of, that we, so that we know the boundaries maybe of the conclusions that can be drawn? So how are our populations different? Obviously there's the water aspect of it, the environment, but how do we differ? What are they better at than us?
Oh boy, that's a whole other podcast. The dolphins are better than us. So many things. I'm
dolphin co-host for that one.
Yeah. So dolphins are different because all they eat are fish for the most part, right? There's not this variety of, especially if we're talking the Western world, right? All they eat are fish. They exercise, so they're always moving, right? And so they're fit animals. You don't have an issue with regard to obese dolphins sitting on the couch and eating unhealthy food. And while humans, right, completely different. So much differences in environment, in diet, in genetics. And so on first glance, it's almost like, Robbie, kind of what you get into is how could these possibly be comparable? And so those are really important differences. Where kind of the rubber hits the road with the science is that it ends up that what appeared initially to be very different opened up an avenue to understand a critical insight into humans. And so I'll lay that one out real quick so that I can back up what I'm saying. And so
please do.
I have to get to C15, okay, right, of course, which is odd chain saturated fatty acid that we've discovered and proposed with Ed Dennis, an expert in lipids, in scientific reports in 2020, that C15 is the third essential fatty acid to be discovered in 90 years. So we discovered that by noticing that healthy aging dolphins had higher levels of C15 in their blood compared to poor aging dolphins. And it ends up that the dolphins that had higher C15 were getting more C15 from their diet. So not all fish have C15, some have it and some don't, and the dolphins that were getting more fish with more C15 in it were healthier. So we did a study, which Eric had mentioned, where then we gave poor aging dolphins a fish diet that had higher C15 in it. And those dolphins, the aging-related conditions like high glucose, high insulin, high cholesterol, were alleviated. So, okay, interesting for dolphins. Meanwhile, and it ends up, long story short, that the dolphins had been accidentally fed or unintentionally fed a diet that was low in C15. We didn't even know to look for C15 before. And when you fix those C15 levels, the dolphins get better. So, move on to the human populations. When we look at C15 can come from fish, but our primary source of it is actually dairy fat and butter. And so when we look at, the dolphins for about 30 to 40 years have been receiving a C15 deficient diet, which in part is also being attributed to climate change, because fish are getting less fat. Less fat means less C15. Wow. So anyway,
warming of the ocean. Less fat in the fish.
Bigger problem there. And so for the human side, about the same time the Navy Dolphins were getting less C15 through their fish, we as humans were greatly decreasing our C15 because we started cutting out milk fat, right? And so no butter, no whole fat milk. I grew up on blue milk and margarine, and we were all told don't eat saturated fats. And so C15 is a trace saturated fat. So we decreased that amount in our populations, and now study after study, 19 studies in 2021 alone from other folks, including Harvard and Hopkins and Cambridge, all showing that people who have higher C15 levels in their blood have a lower risk of type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease, heart failure, and even mortality. So even though these models were very different, it ends up that the dolphins have served as kind of like a finding what molecules in our body are important, and is kind of like finding a needle in a needle stack because it's so clean. And when we pick out those molecules, we found about 100 of them to date. We picked out that first one, C15, and it only took, it didn't take a lot to then translate that to how that relates in humans. That was a long answer.
No, but that's a really interesting point there, because it took a lot of work. And I just want to stress this because I know that both of you obviously know that it took a lot of work. But for everyone else listening who is thinking about this startup story and what it takes to actually take something and translate it from bench research with the complicated settings and to get it to where you can see signal like that, were there any times where both of you just thought, this is a dead end, this is not going to work? And if there were, could you talk about those? How did you both get through those times?
There's a lot of moments like that. This molecule had not been proposed or discovered as an essential molecule, right? And so if you're going to bring something like that to market, I mean, there's a lot to be done. Even from no one manufactured it. And so we had to create a process and scale up that process to multiple tons. It takes a long time. And then, from the intellectual property standpoint, if we were going to put this investment in, probably good to have some kind of intellectual property, I think it just went down here, backing. And so we spent a lot of time working with Navy and with the Tech Transfer Office and with IP attorneys to secure some of that IP. And so those are just two examples of the different things that you have to do to translate a discovery into actually a product. And that's not even talking about the scientific, work that needs to be done from discovery to the point where you can have something available for people to actually ingest.
Yeah, and Rob, you can imagine the two of us walking into a room of venture capitalists and who nobody knows, right? I've never heard of the Venn-Watsons before. There's a veterinarian and a physician, they're a military family coming in, and we're pitching, hey, we think we've discovered the first essential fatty acid in 90 years. Oh, by the way, it's a saturated fat. And oh, by the way, we discovered it in dolphins, right? And so always, since the beginning, it's been an interesting story, but to get to the point where it's like, oh, this is real. And if you're talking about you just discovered the next omega-3, that took years. And the most important aspect of it, even though initial skepticism on the science front, which then we brought them in, learned from them, and was able to grow the science and the credibility, but the ability to basically, the science always landed. So what kept us going was that we would have a skeptic come in and say, well, if this was true, then if you did this, X, you would get Y. We're like, oh, okay. So we would raise money from friends and family and do X, and we're like, oh, hey, here's Y. What should we do next? And so it took 5 years of those iterations that then led to this paper in Scientific Reports. There are 8 studies. All 8 studies that we did to kind of answer those key questions, we held on to, waited until they all resulted in where they should have landed, and only then, because the science supported it, did we say, yeah, we're ready to start telling the world that a saturated fat is good for them. So, and we even got to the point where the science our advisors said, hey, this has now moved from exciting research to a moral obligation, Steph and Eric, to bring this to the world. So that's what kept us going, was really the validity and credibility of the science, to the point where now we have an opportunity to truly improve global health, and now we just can't not do it. That makes sense.
That does make sense. And what's interesting to me is, well, a couple of things, but for sure, this is just a great story for health and human medicine, and obviously zoology and the care of these dolphins. But it's such a great example of the scientific process. This kind of gradual accumulation of evidence, addressing the naysayers head on, instead of ignoring the objections or whataboutisms. And you guys both did that, and I'm sure with the team as well. And being able to land and convert those people into advocates for what you're doing instead of skepticism. And skepticism is something that is tricky, right? Because it's required to make great things, great products, but also great research and findings. I do want to turn back or go back just to one thing, just to some baseline knowledge. As a medical doctor, we're trained. Even when I was in med school, Eric, I don't know, tell me if this was true for you too. The saturated fat, the story behind how we view fat. Can you talk about, do you think what that story was, and if you both think that story needs to be changed, given your findings and how you're approaching the problem of cardiometabolic disease with things like C15?
And I agree, during training, and I think just in general, the perception is that, fats are not great for us, right? And I think that perception of fats in general is starting to change, and people are starting to realize that, hey, not all fats are vilified. However, there's still a bucket, saturated fats, that are still vilified. And so, our goal here and our findings support that you can't bucket that class of molecules all as, bad for your health. There are some that are bad, and there are some are good, and there are some that are even essential for your health. Like, meaning your body cannot make C15, you need to get it from your diet, or you have less good health. Illness, things like that. And so I think that's changing, Robbie. We're at the tip of the spear pushing the science around the nutrition and what we should be eating with regards to saturated fats. But the world is catching up, and I think medical training is catching up as well. And I think we're at a pivotal point of understanding the importance of micronutrients to our diet.
Yeah, and it's,
and when you,
I'll show, we're not alone, which has been amazing during 2021. What has happened? We put out this paper in 2020 saying, hey, is C15 not only a healthy saturated fat, what's called these odd chain saturated fats, versus even chain, which continue to be associated with poor health. Whether or not they're the cause, I think, is now that's under debate. But these odd chain saturated fatty acids, when we put the paper out, not only as beneficial, whoops, world, sorry, sorry that we took them all away from you, but that it may in fact be essential, which means, has led to the hypothesis that C15 nutritional deficiencies are actually the drivers of cardiometabolic diseases, the very diseases we're trying to prevent by taking whole fat milk and butter away. So we're not alone. In 2021 alone, there have been multiple calls to action from leaders in the food and ingredient industry, from the nutrition communities, saying we need to take a closer look at C15, at these odd chain saturated fatty acids. It was a cover of the magazine Inform, which no is not sitting next to Vogue in the magazine stores, but it's a trade journal around experts and people working in nutritional lipids. So, and then on top of that, like I shared, at least 19 peer-reviewed publications coming from all these different independent research groups throughout the world, all showing C15 is beneficial. So it's super exciting to see this momentum happen. I don't think it's going to be much longer before this gets brought, in front of, to help drive and adapt recommendations. Pediatricians today are told to tell every parent of every 2-year-old that it's time for them to come off whole fat milk, regardless of their health. if indeed this ends up being where we don't want to drive C15 deficiencies to create these diseases in younger people, to be able to help be part of responsibly evaluating that change is very meaningful to us.
And do you feel like this needs to be a part of like the panel in a yearly physical type thing? Are you both imagining that this just needs to be something that we need to be checking in the same way that we check routine, quote unquote, routine labs? This needs to be routine. Because it seems like, am I right in saying it's easily fixable in terms of its levels? I mean, it's something that you can, if you don't have enough of it, it's okay, we can supplement it. So maybe a parallel would be vitamin D and how we're approaching vitamin D supplementation these days versus how we used to think about it and how it's probably driving, to some significant portion of the population, some real symptoms.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think it's going to come in stages, right? So currently, 5-year physicals, we get our CBC, our chemistry, our lipid panel, LFTs, things like that. And so you can see some of the effects of being deficient in those. You may be more anemic, your LFTs may be high, your cholesterol panel's elevated. And then, having C15 back in your diet, you may know improvements in that. So that's phase 1. And then phase 2, exactly. There may be a time where we want to get a fatty acid panel and have different fatty acids, including C15, as part of that panel. If you look at more and more people are getting omega-3 values or vitamin D, as you mentioned. I mean, those things, after they're determined to be beneficial, then generally we want to test for those things. And so that may be happening down the road.
So speaking of down the road, it seems like, am I right in saying that you guys have built a bridge between dolphins and humans? I'm sure it's not stopping at this one molecule. Can you talk about how do we view kind of ongoing research and what are you both up to with this relationship that you've established now? Or I hate to say animal model because I don't want to degrade dolphins, but we're all animals here. But how do you approach this going forward? Is this the beginning of many things that are yet to come?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the beginning of many, many, many more things to come. So through the metabolomics, we work and looking at being able to, if you can imagine, right, if not only do you have the ability to look at hundreds or thousands of small molecules in a long-lived, large-brained mammal throughout its entire lifetime, but you could then match that against all the CBC and serum chemistry values throughout their life, as well as outcomes, like did they get or not get Alzheimer's disease? Did they get or not get fatty liver disease, inflammation, high cholesterol? So we have all these amazing and relevant endpoints matched with the technology that's readily available today. We actually just finished doing genome sequencing on the whole population, which is really exciting. So stay tuned for outputs from that. But what we've been able to do is now identify 200 small molecules in the dolphins that appear to be predictive against a variety of conditions. It might be Alzheimer's or liver disease or metabolic syndrome or just accelerated aging. So we're started with molecule 1, our baby, with C15. We have Department of Defense funding to be able to, in which we're currently advancing 3 more of the molecules in that pipeline. We're also taking the natural molecules and working with them in the lab to create analogs, which is more of our drug development pipeline, so that once we find out how the small molecules work, we could then adapt them and analog them to better target specific receptors that are more focused on specific drug treating properties. So we have funding from the Army too, in which we're pursuing one of those for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. So lots to come.
Yeah, I want to talk about the moral obligation, right? So it is important for us to be able to take these discoveries and translate them to molecules that can improve human health, both on a natural standpoint, natural molecules that can be supplements or food ingredients, and on the pharmaceutical side. And so we have shown that there are benefits to looking at a model, like Stephanie mentioned, a long-lived, big-brained animal that doesn't smoke, drink, and do all the things that and is monitored on a daily basis. And so that platform's in place, and now it's time to really figure out, why do some dolphins get Alzheimer's, some don't? Well, same in humans. What is that? And so this...
Do they get Alzheimer's type?
They do.
Yeah,
disease?
which is amazing because there's only, this is not my expertise, but there's only a few models that naturally get Alzheimer's, and dolphins being one of them, primates, humans, things like that. And so
that surprises me.
Right.
Yeah, right. Isn't
exactly.
that? And so Oxford University published that 2 or 3 years ago. We were actually already had our whole own Alzheimer's discovery program well underway. Where we're matching metabolomes with histology outcomes from the dolphins that have passed. They have what's called a brainery. So we were able to tap into there and be able to tie specific histology and severity of disease to metabolomes.
Yeah, and for instance, that's a good example. Another good example is NASH, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, right? Liver diseases. And so currently there's no cure, and it's getting worse, right? 1 out of every 4 people in the U.S. has NAFLD, or the beginnings of this process. 1 in 10 kids are starting to have fatty liver disease, NAFLD.
I think it's going to be one of the leading causes of liver transplant pretty soon.
Yeah,
I don't think it is now, but it probably will be.
Yeah.
And so we have this incredible opportunity because, this is a natural molecule that gets metabolic syndrome and the precursors and NAFLD and things like that to study how that happens, clear of all the other things we do, and then to be able to turn those discoveries into therapeutics for that. And we actually did a lot of work with a molecule and some analogs for NASH and have some pretty incredible results.
And as a veterinarian, then I have to also, I love the full circle. We've been dedicated to public health and individual health, but it's been so nice that all of these discoveries, Robbie, are coming back to the dolphins. So the dolphins, Navy dolphins are set for this, actually be 2022 to start getting their C15 supplementation as part of their routine health care.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so I'm very impressed with, because I'm just forgetting about the dogs. I'm so biased to humans because I'm a human physician. But you're right, the dolphins do need to be paid back for their incredible contributions here, and I feel like they're really not getting. So are they stakeholders? I mean, do they have equity in the startup, or are you like co-founders? Do you have like a liaison that you talk to that just is like the one dolphin is like, I'll take care of the negotiation. You deal with me. I'll deal with the rest of my team.
I don't know if we get to the point where we understand their language, they would probably outsmart us in those in negotiations, Robbie. So
I do have to bring up one just tangential thing here, and to get what is it with cetaceans? Obviously, they live in they have complicated social relationships, which probably has a lot to do with how they evolved to have a lot of cognitive processing. In addition to, I'm preaching to the choir. There's other things that they can do that really that are pretty amazing. But like bowhead whales too. What is this association with longevity and the marine mammals? What are they doing that we're not doing? Is a question. When I first read and researched that bowhead whale situation 10 years ago, I was like, I can't believe that. I mean, how is that possible that they're finding harpoon tips that are dated to be around 180 years old? And why don't they get the same diseases? So I was kind of surprised when you said that dolphins do get them. So it's like they're not magic. They do have systems that we have, and they do get Alzheimer's. They do get hyperlipidemia or lipid problems. So that's interesting. Can you both talk about what it was like to now you're sitting on incredible research? You've taken on the naysayers. You've convinced them, we have something here that's real. And you're now in front of investors, and you've convinced them too. And you've got backing now from not just them, but also from the institution of the Navy, which is huge, and the Department of Defense. So what's the next step, and what was it like turning that into an operational process to, Eric, like you were saying, you don't think of the word tons when you think of small molecules, but that's what you really have to do is to make tons of, they're like, cool, this is great. Like, how many tons do you have this week? You're like, what? I have to ship this to people. That is measured in tons. So what was it like to go from the science background that you all have, the medical background, and I know, Eric, you have a business background as well and have been involved in startups. Could you talk about that process?
Yeah, these are big questions, right? When are you ready? Are you going to be ready? When are you ready? And what's it going to look like to bring this molecule to the world? And I will say that we started working with Kim Kamdar from Domain, one of the big VCs here, and she just was awesome. And so we met with her and Nick Shork, one of the leaders in the world in longevity, once a week, every week, for 3 years. 3 years. And so there was a lot of whiteboarding sessions and a lot of, let's make sure that as we roll this out, we have the science, the structure in place, to where if we're going to bring this to the market, we're going to do it in a way that is, safe, efficacious, scalable, protectable, all that kind of stuff. And so after a couple years of meeting, we decided, okay, let's form an entity, and that was Serafina Therapeutics. Transfer the appropriate IP into that, take on VC funding, and then work on the strategy that we had put in place of, okay, manufacturing, supply chain, intellectual property, licensing, branding. And I mean, just so many stories that from there on.
What was the hardest part of that? What was the one that you? Well, let me ask you both questions. What was easier than you thought it was going to be, and what was harder than you expected it to be?
Yeah, there's a leap of faith to go from in a scientific discovery that has incredible data to an actual product, and that big leap of faith is you need money to be able to do those things, and so what order, how much, all that kind of thing, and it's that's a scary jump, and so. We worked with a branding agency, that was going to help us create the name and the packaging, and those kind of conversations are fun, but, anxiety provoking. We want to name this, you want to name this Fatty 15, that's kind of
my nickname in freshman year in college, by the way.
Right, exactly. And 15 for 15 carbons, fatty for, and the point was, at first when they said we're going to name it that, or, think about naming it, we said, no way. But then we had a 4-hour discussion on what.
Why? Why were you guys so opposed to it when that name came out?
Exactly what you said. I mean, the connotation around this name is negative. Around fatty and fats. And so, but that's the whole point, is we're trying to change that. And so we determined after many hours of negotiating this to come up with a name that would get people talking about this. And it's really interesting, just to fast forward it once, we put this out there, and then we didn't know how the public was going to respond. And we still get a few people saying, oh, Fatty 15, that, I don't like that name. But in general, most people like the name, and then if they come back to us questions and we say why we named it that, it's to get people talking about saturated fats, that they're not all bad for you, some are good, and kind of change this perception of these molecules. People come back and they say, thank you. And so it's been really interesting. A name has a lot of power. And so there was a lot of discussion on that, as there were every other, segment of what you need to bring a product to market.
What was easier than you thought it was going to be? What were you both nervous about, possibly, or anxious about, that ended up being, oh, okay, that was not as bad as I thought?
Yeah, I mean, doing what we're doing, Robbie, as Serafina, so EpiTracker is the parent company, working with the Navy with the Dolphins. We spun out Serafina. Our assumption is Serafina will get funded. The real folks will step in, lead this company and help improve global health with it. And I think some of the surprise that we are finally coming to understand, and it's different than the pharma world, where where we've really kind of done most of our training in the startup world, but is that Eric and I today, we are the brand, we are the science, and we're the co-founders, and especially with a consumer-driven product, that means so much to the chances of success of a product, right? If as we're talking here with you, it's and our enthusiasm behind it, the depth of the science behind it, as a physician, as a veterinarian, going through the whole experience of the branding, I won't call it easy, but it's been surprising to say, you can step into these roles as CEO and COO, that even though it's right now, driven toward a supplement driven company with food ingredients and a pharma potential, that, for now, for this exciting stage of growth, that we keep realizing, yeah, this is it. So we're stepping up and doing all the fun parts, and it's so much more fun than I ever imagined. I have to tell you, I had a bias against the supplement world, didn't know how to handle the consumer world, and you have ads to customers, though.
What was the bias? What was your bias toward the supplement world?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of gets to your other question of what's been difficult. So we were going to put C15 out as a drug. We were doing the studies and all of these things to be able to enable physicians to have a safe product that they could give to their patients, along with other medications that could have these benefits. When COVID happened, no clinical trials, right? And so we're like, we're going to be who knows how long without being able to do a clinical trial. Meanwhile, we had all this great science, the discovery of it as an essential fatty acid, and along with our advisor said, this needs to be a supplement. Like, this needs to have better access. The world needs to have better access to it than just as a prescription drug. So, in part because of COVID, we pivoted and said, let's go all in with the supplement. Let's do it. Let's get it out there. We have the safety data. We have everything that we needed because we were preparing for much more stringent rules and testing as a drug. So it was like over-prepared for the supplement market. And so the challenge goes with your other question, skepticism. The supplement market is not it's regulated for safety, not for efficacy. Claims can be made that aren't backed. There are, we see paper after paper of people go in and they test what's in the supplement, what's there isn't there, and what is there isn't what people thought was there. And so it has earned tons of skepticism. And then we're thinking, we're going to step into this, high science, rigorous, high ethics. And so what we're doing now is really working to raise the bar on the supplement industry because we have the ability to really bring, with metabolomics and all these discoveries made by us and others, it's just a whole new golden age of nutrition and supplements that we are seeing customers and consumers hungry for the science, hungry for so that there will be a natural rising to the top of those of us who are being responsible and efficacy and data-based and those kind of more in the riffraff.
Yeah, and responsible is not inexpensive in this case. We, for instance, our ingredient, we created a way to scale it up that was, non-animal sourced. It was, from a plant-based ingredient that is not something that is, cutting down forests, things like that, that's very sustainable. The molecule we have now is, the last batch was 99.8% pure, C15, which, from a supplement standpoint, is rare, right? And so because it's the molecule the way it is, we don't use any fillers or anything like that. So when people are getting, C15 from us, it is almost 100% pure with no fillers, no nothing. And it's just the ingredient. And that's pretty uncommon in this world. But it was something that was important to us to have the highest quality ingredient in the most bioavailable form that we could get to the world.
Yeah, that's amazing, and that's a lot of work to get there. So, congrats and hats off to that dedication to the just the ethics of just standing by what the label says on the side of the box. I agree with both of you. I agree. It's like there's so many supplements that probably do work, but it's hard to sort out what's real and what's not. And it's kind of crazy. It feels like there needs to be, I don't want to say regulation, but at least some kind of like a seal of approval or of some sorts that just like some industry insiders can say, look, this has got an extra level of scrutiny and we're just more sure that it does something. I was so against supplement. I have the same bias as a medical doctor because we're just like, oh, they didn't go through the actual testing. But then when you look through, of course we have testing and lots of stuff, but I have a related question to this, but it's how do you explain this concept of levels of evidence? Because when I have patients, sometimes I'm like, well, there's things I'm sure about, and then there's things that I think are a good idea. So like when you're testing on a child, for example, you're like, well, I'm not going to do a randomized clinical control trial on not using Tylenol versus one group where you do use Tylenol for a fever of 105, and another, you're like, I just think it's a good idea, so we'll just go with that, right? And then there's like, for adults, we're like, well, there's lots of things that we think are good ideas that don't turn out to pan out because the human body is so much more complicated with all the ways it interacts. But explaining that is a challenge. And, Eric, I start with you on this. I mean, as a physician who's bridging knowledge to people, and then, Steph, both you as well, it's like, okay, now there's Dolphin knowledge I've got to bridge to people. How in a consumer market, right, do you explain all these concepts in a way that doesn't have to come with a 30-page font size 4 FDA insert, right? You know? So how do you get this across? Hey, it comes from dolphins. There's ones that age differently. There's, you know, how is that process? Do people seem to understand it? Are they getting it?
Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, you know, this there's a lot of skepticism. So how do you get through that? One is there's different proof points, right? So ours is a new dietary ingredient. We got GRAS status, which is, you know, basically the ability to use this as a food ingredient that requires a lot of tox studies and, you know, looking at different populations and giving populations a very large doses to see if there's anything that would be toxic or, you know, potentially bad for people. So, you know, a lot of supplements don't do that. We took it up, you know, a few notches to be able to do that. And so, you know, one of the things that is nice about this molecule, for instance, like omega-3s, right? So as physicians, you know, often we will prescribe, you know, or have people take omega-3s because it's one of the safe medications you can take with a statin. Or, you know, you don't have to worry so much about the polypharmacy. So, you know, a molecule that's safe and efficacious that can be used with, you know, different medications that doesn't have the complications of, you know, worrying about side effects with polypharmacy is something that the world needs. You know, and something that's seen as very valuable. So, you know, doing those studies and showing you have a safe molecule with efficacious gives you a lot of proof that then the challenge is how do you translate that into, you know, a consumer product and how do you get that information out? And so the way we've done that with this molecule is after, you know, people, you know, we put it on the website, we have a great community, people are talking about it, and after you become a customer of ours, you get an onboarding email series that says, what's happening to your body at day 1? What's happening at day 5? And then not only that, but hey, if you want to read more, here's the study. Read our Nature paper. Read the one that just came out from Harvard, you know, and that kind of thing. So people generally have been pretty pleased with that onboarding and have been amazingly into the science. And so that's just one of the ways where we're conveying, you know, the importance of this molecule and the benefits to your body.
Do you think that's interesting that, especially in the time of COVID, when there's differing views on, I mean, you can see different approaches to how public officials treat the quote-unquote lay public. And it seems to be, like, it always seems to end up where it's like if you don't talk down to people, give them the opportunity to look at the data or they really appreciate it. There seems to be a genuine appreciation for giving people the information and not cramming it down their throats, but letting them feel like, hey, they're making a decision for their best interests.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, this is a great point because, you know, natural molecules, the supplement world, you're not allowed to talk about disease and treating disease. You know, however, we have this molecule that's right in the middle of pharma and natural products. So how do we convey that? Because people want to learn about it. And so we actually use a law firm in everything, you know, that we put out there to make sure that we're doing it appropriately. So when we have an advertisement or something like that going on, we want to link directly to the paper that shows, hey, you know, people live longer taking C15, or it's good for your whatever, cardiovascular health, things like that, but you can't. So you have to go either, you know, click through a neutral page to the article, or you have to put that data someplace else and say, hey, if you want to read more about that, go here. So one of the ways we found that's good is we link to a blog article that we wrote, you know, giving a summary that's not disease, you know, specific, and then if you want to read more, click here. So now there's 2 clicks, and that from the FDA standpoint is, you know, kind of the gold standard of how to do this. But the answer to your question is it's tough because you can't just say, here you go. Here's the data, read about it.
Do you feel like this needs to, is this something on the agenda for us to change in the future as a generation of people who are, because I'm in the same area, right, with where it's like health coaching and basically health behavior change, like exercise. Well, we technically, what is true is that exercise is a foundational form of therapy for the diseases to prevent them, and also in some cases to mitigate the effects. And are we doing ourselves as a culture a disservice by not admitting that? Because is there reform coming or that needs to be pushed forward at a policy level to let bona fide evidence-based things like what you're creating have their own pathway where you can be honest about the results and what those effects are? Is that something that is really, because it seems like from when you're talking about it, that's been almost as hard to navigate as the actual dolphins.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think consumers are driving this, which is great, right? Because we're all consumers and we all are aging and we all want to be healthy for as long as we can. And so
you guys look very young. I'm Asian, which means I age in a staccato. Like I look really young as an Indian male till I'm like 68, and then all of a sudden within a year I just gained 10 years, and I have a kyphotic spine.
7? What?
Yeah. So you're 82.
Yeah, it's get stiff.
So I do think consumers are driving it. I think just as importantly, people like yourself and Eric, right, that physicians are driving it. We're seeing increasingly in medical conferences, especially the cutting edge ones, that you're starting to see sessions on nutrition, and we tested this diet and intermittent fasting, and there's discussions about drugs, but increasingly discussions about non-drug, ways that are in which the evidence is building that this helps. I mean, exercises obviously, and good sleep, and a good diet are all these core parts. But then there's a way to kind of dive in which part of the diet and what types of exercise and how long. That people are not only are they ready to accept if you provide and show that you have some depth and some science behind it. They're, I think both, we're enabling ourselves as adults to read the internet and for better or worse, and make decisions about our life and health, but including taking supplements. And we're going to our physicians less. I'm not sure that's for the better, but, I think the world is like you're saying, Rob, is opening up to, it's more than just a drug. We cannot wait until a disease has reached a state to be treated as our only solution to, improving health. We just need this better view of whole body health. Yeah. And so, the Dolphins are this non-biased population where we get to go find, what's helping their whole body, and be able to translate over, which has been great.
Well, it's no accident that you have the same last names, right? It's so you're clearly married, and what has that been like through this process? What's it done to your relationship? I'm really curious about this. How have you both grown as a couple? What have you learned about each other? I'd love to hear what you guys think.
Yeah. Oh, I see. You're heading to me first. So when we first started this, right, with EpiTracker. Eric was, practicing physician. I was working at the Navy with the Dolphins. This discovery was made. We both have some pretty heavy entrepreneurial backgrounds. And so we decided, well, let's go ahead and get EpiTracker underway and build this program with the Navy, in collaboration with the Navy. And so as we started building that, we started building the company, but we also started building our relationship, right? So we're husband-wife team. We're also military family. And I think that's played a huge role in the answer to your question, because Eric's, went to war. He's been to war multiple times. He was in Afghanistan at the height of the war in the Helmand province. I was at home with a 2.5-year-old learning how to poop in a bowl. So it was like a crazy time. I woke up every morning not knowing if Eric had made it through the night. And waiting for that call to hear that he's okay. So when you go through something like that and you survive, you're either stronger for it or too challenged by it, right? And so as a couple and as a military family. And for us, we were really lucky that we were better for it. So when we went in to do the startup, right, this is post-war, your perspective entirely changes on what's important. Okay, Eric's alive. Check. it's like the nobody's dying. If the ups and downs of the challenges of the startup world are nothing compared to military. The military world, family and life drives us to do work that translates. And if it doesn't translate, you drop it, fail quickly, right? And you move on to the next, because our goal isn't to let something linger forever. It's to get meaningful change to the world. So for us, it was a hard, I think in the beginning we were trying to find what our roles were, but I think it took Eric, 3 months. Yeah. And we just fell naturally into Eric's an amazing master operator. And I'm as you can tell, talk a lot. So that's a CEO's role. And it's been incredibly complimentary. And Ravi, I wouldn't have done this without him. I mean, it's been such an incredible journey. So much of it is because I've gotten to do this with my best friend. So it's been great.
Yeah, I agree. I think, there's certain periods in your life where this works. And so you need to have, a background and confidence in your abilities
there's that.
and things like that. That you need to have a strong base, to be able to do this. And then, it helps that our skill sets are very different. If there's not something getting done, I get very anxious. Like, I got to do it. It's got to happen, and I will find a way to do it. And then on Steph, she's been on NPR Science Friday twice, and J&J Innovation, and Pfizer, and Boehringer Ingelheim, and all that kind of stuff. And so she's very good at the translating the science into something that gets people excited and resonates to the layperson. And so, these skills are very different, but both very much needed. So, I don't know that we knew that would be the case ahead of time, but I don't think we ever had to say, you do this and I'll do that. It was just get it done and we're doing our part of it. So that worked out.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear. 'Cause I could definitely see how in some situations for some couples that could go sideways and go opposite, even though I think everyone is more used to working with their partners in more closer proximity given the pandemic. There's some horror stories that have grown out of that last year, right? For sure.
For sure.
So I'm glad that didn't happen. So what do you both do outside of this just to live your life? Like, what do you do for fun? What supplements are you on? What is your regime for staying sane in this crazy world right now?
I'm pretty sure we sit here 24 hours a day and work.
Yeah, you're looking at it. This is fun. What are you talking? It's all everything. Yeah.
We're very fortunate to be in San Diego, right? And so, the weather is very nice and we can get outside and do things where, some parts of the country right now, it's less able to do that. And then the other thing about San Diego is, people are generally really nice. Like, you can reach out to whoever, even if they're a prior CEO of a huge company or something like that. And so it's relatively easier to form positive and lasting relationships here than it may be otherwise. So I think a combination of getting out, improving your health and body as in addition to your mind, and then social functions are important. And I will say that we are working a lot right now to build this, and we could do more of that, but it's nice to have that as well. And
we have a 13-year-old, a keyboard, a bass guitar, and electric guitar, and so, it's a Partridge Family situation. So we're going to have a lot of fun jamming with our kid.
What's next for you both and the company, and what do you need to unlock it? Like, what would really help just get you to the next milestone?
Right, and so this is a pivotal time, right? So we launched this supplement January 4th. Not too long ago. Mm-hmm. We sold out in 6 weeks, without any advertising, just based on people reading the Nature paper. Mm-hmm. And so then we scaled up everything, and now we're going to hit 10 tons of production, and these are, huge milestones. And so we met financial milestones, we met, all the things we had to do. And so now we've brought on additional investors. And some of those investors, Camdar Domain, Lou, the prior CEO of Coach, Larry, the CEO of the Vitamin Shop, Tiffany SoulCycle, the prior CEO of Amylin, Dan. And so we now have a team in place that has experience in pharma, in food ingredients, and consumer, and have been, responsible for significant generation of large companies and company wealth. And so now we're really revamping things, looking into, okay, how do we create a structure to be a much larger company? And so we're taking a little time here to put that in place with their input. And so, as Stephanie mentioned, there's more and more articles being published that we're not doing that's showing the benefits of this molecule in OCFAs, right? And some of those, like Steph mentioned, was one was a 16-year longitudinal study saying if you have higher levels of C15, you're less likely to die, and have cardiovascular disease, which, we're working on potential claims with the FDA for that. But there is so much coming, and that train has left the station. And so it's an incredible time. We're building the base to be able to, deal with that, with what's happening in the world, knowing about this molecule, this ingredient, and wanting it.
Yeah, and really helping to drive the story, like Eric said, of bringing on more people into our consortium to help turn these calls of action into action. So, from more of a global perspective of looking at, as the data continue to come out around C15, to be able to change the conversation around saturated fats. Let's get our kids back into an ideal health state from day one, or at least age 2. And so all of that's, on the forefront. On the Dolphin side, continuing to wonderfully advance the molecules that we've discovered. Like we said, just starting to play with the genomic work. Super fun on that front. So, yeah, Eric calls it a train. I'd say we spent 10 years building a roller coaster, and now we're just in it and ready to enjoy the ride.
So to bring this full circle into your all's backgrounds, I mean, could you have predicted? If I had told the 10 years ago, even 15 years ago, both of you, this is what you were going to be working on, what would you have said? Was this something that was a glint in your eye back then, or is it like that would have been a complete shock to somebody in 2005, let's say? To you both, 2005.
Yeah, no, I never would have played this one out predictably. I think I could have bought that we would have found a need, and we were working to fill it. So something that generic, but the fact that it'd be a saturated fat, just had that got discovered while helping Navy Dolphins, and is now improving individuals' lives, through our customers' testimonials today, which are incredibly touching. Yeah, Robbie, no, I don't know, Eric, maybe you had it all written out ahead of time.
Background, right, medicine, military, orthopedics, aerospace medicine, all that. So I was on a very different track there, and I had the ability using the GI Bill to go to Rady, to UCSD program, which I was the first night class, and what a great program, especially for entrepreneurs. And so that really changed the deployments and having to create medical systems out of nothing, right? Go take care of your Marines and sailors and don't jack it up, and being able to do those entrepreneurial endeavors, plus the MBA program and the excitement around, San Diego and the ecosystem. I mean, that changed the direction. I actually, after, the MBA program, I actually went back to my mentors in orthopedic surgery, Dr. Caldwell and DeLima, and said, we should take some of the technology you're developing because it's so amazing and we should create a company. And so, to make a long story short, we did Expand Ortho that was acquired, and so I kind of got the taste of that. And then, seeing what Stephanie was doing and this program was doing, and the amazing discoveries that were being made, and the population living 50% longer than those in the wild. I mean, that was something that I couldn't say no to, trying to understand and bring some of those discoveries to the world. So no, I wouldn't have predicted I would be, working with, dolphin population, super healthy dolphin population, and working on a supplement food ingredient in pharma. But, it happened that way, and I wouldn't take it back.
So I'll leave you with a question, what advice would you give to people who were in your position 15 years ago, or maybe they found something and they just need that push to operationalize it? What advice would you give to young budding entrepreneurs? Yeah,
I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when we were talking about skeptics. And so, there's a lot of skeptics out there. And so, part of the reason that we were able to do this because those skeptics were non-believers at first. They said, what you're finding things in this dolphin model that you think have relevance for humans? or, you think you can manufacture this in 10-ton, capabilities, those type of things. And so the skeptics, help you work through the things. And once you turn them, that says a lot, because then they go from skeptic to, oh my God, you're sitting on something amazing. We want to be a part of it. And that's how, actually, to be perfectly honest, that's how a lot of our advisors came on board. They would say, I don't know, tell me more. It's interesting, but tell me more. And so after that, doing that with every field and, bringing on people that knew more about manufacturing, about, working with supplements and all that, then you have the ability to move forward, and hopefully, make less mistakes as you move forward, because you've had skeptics dig into this and tell you what all the pitfalls are.
Yeah, I just say pitch 1,000 times, and know that with each pitch, you're going to learn something and be able to answer a question in the next pitch that you couldn't before. And I think I'm joking about the 1,000 pitches, but and start with friends that'll be brutal, and work your way up from there. Like Eric said, it's the same. It's the people who are easily in and say, that sounds great. That doesn't help. You need the people, you need to embrace criticism, and don't take it personally. And if the criticism is valid, you need to either address it. And if you can't address it with your product, you might need to change to a different product. So, and then the other is like I said, with the science for entrepreneurs in the science realm, that if you are seeing something and the science is showing it, and you're looking at it in 8 different ways, and it's telling you that same story, as much as it is the whole thing that I've said before, groundbreaking research or groundbreaking discoveries are when you're literally, you're breaking the firm ground that everybody has stood upon. So if it's groundbreaking, nobody's going to believe you when you first tell them. Otherwise, it's not really groundbreaking. It's not a discovery. And it's okay. So you need to understand that it takes time, and you have to earn the acceptance of that discovery by continuing the science. And if the science shows it, forget what the other people are saying, who now at this point don't know nearly as much as you do in this realm, and your team, and just keep forging forward unless the data are telling you otherwise. So that would be my advice to the science entrepreneurs.
That's great advice. And you both represent the full story, from taking something from nanograms to, as you said, tons, right? Well, how can people be involved with you both and the company? How do people get a hold of you, keep track of what's going on, these new exciting announcements, including the very interesting molecules that are coming down the pipeline? How can people help?
Yeah, oh my goodness.
Check out www.fatty15.com. And so that's where there's a newsletter, there's a lot of information on there. There's the blogs talking about, what's happening in the world of lipids, what's happening in the world of, treating cardiovascular disease, things like that. And then, reach out to us, anytime. There's an info@fatty15 as well. We try to respond to actually every single person who writes on there. We have a community manager as well. But this has been an amazing adventure, and the more people on this adventure with us, and the more people that are helping to kind of change the world's messaging around healthy fats, the better.
Yeah, we have started a movement, and we're building the community to help enable and improve people's lives, first starting with C15 and Fatty 15. And so like Eric said, we're looking for those megaphones in all aspects. Join the movement, info@fatty15.com, and reach out. We're building our crew, so I'd love to hear from folks.
That sounds amazing, and I would just like to thank you both again for taking the time out of obviously a very busy schedule for this pipeline of awesome discoveries, and to take the time to come and tell me about it, because we'll have to do this again when there's new science and there's new announcements, because I'd love to hear this. So I can go get this now, right? You're not having supply chain issues. This isn't being made in Taiwan in a microchip factory. This is...
There you go. There it is. Okay.
Yeah.
And like you said earlier, it's not a luxury; it's an investment. It's an investment in longevity and health.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, it's been awesome.